The exile was meant to be their end. Humanity had been cast out, labeled too dangerous, too unpredictable, too violent for the so-called civilized galaxy. The United Galactic Council had come together in secret, deciding that humankind was an anomaly, one that needed to be erased. Not through war, not through outright genocide, but by simple abandonment. The plan was simple. They loaded the last remnants of humanity onto old colony ships and sent them to the void, into uncharted space where no one would follow. No supplies, no guidance, no future. They would die in the dark. At least that was the expectation. The truth, however, was something no one in the galaxy could have foreseen. 500 years later, the Galactic Council trembled at the mere mention of the name, the Terran Dominion. A forgotten people, banished to the abyss, had not only survived but had thrived. They had conquered. They had adapted to the brutality of deep space, bending entire star systems to their will. They had built warships that could tear apart fleets, trained soldiers who knew nothing but war, and spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The Terran Dominion was not just another empire. It was the empire. It had no equals, no rivals, and no mercy. And now, after centuries in the dark, they had returned to the galaxy that had abandoned them. On the bridge of the dreadnought Indomitable, Admiral Darius Voss stared at the holographic display before him. The Galactic Council's homeworld, Celestria Prime, floated in the vastness of space, its defensive fleets scrambling like ants beneath a shadow they had never expected to see. "Send the message," Voss said, his voice carrying the weight of generations of suffering. The communications officer nodded and transmitted the broadcast to every council world, every outpost, every colony. The words were simple, unambiguous, and laced with the cold fury of a civilization that had not forgotten its betrayal. "We are humanity. We were cast into the void and left to die. You sought to erase us, but we have returned, stronger than you could have ever imagined. Now the galaxy belongs to us." Panic spread like wildfire across Celestria Prime. The Galactic Council, the once mighty rulers of the known universe, had never considered this possibility. Humanity was supposed to be extinct, a forgotten footnote in history. Now their ships darkened the skies, their fleet vast and unstoppable. The cold, precise words of Admiral Voss echoed across every communication channel, chilling leaders to their core. On the surface of Celestria Prime, High Chancellor Aurelius stood in the grand chamber of the Council, surrounded by holograms of leaders from 100 different species. His normally composed features were pale, his hands trembling as he gripped the edge of the podium. "This cannot be real," muttered Chancellor Razek of the Vorkal Dominion, his reptilian scales shifting in distress. "We abandoned them. They should have perished long ago." "And yet they have not," said Councillor Dren Veli of the Celadari, her translucent skin shimmering with unease. "They have returned, not as refugees seeking mercy, but as conquerors." Silence fell over the chamber. No one dared to speak the thought they all shared. The Galactic Council had made a mistake. A grave one. They had feared humanity for its potential for violence, its unpredictability. They had believed exile was a merciful solution, a way to ensure the stability of the galaxy. But they had never considered what would happen if humanity survived, if it adapted, if it evolved. Now their nightmare had come to life. Aboard the Indomitable, Admiral Voss observed the chaos unfolding in real time. Their intelligence networks had already infiltrated the Council's communication systems. He could see the fear in their eyes, the hesitation, the realization that their power meant nothing anymore. A grim smile played at the corners of his lips. "Order the fleet to move into position," he commanded. "I want every Council world to see our strength." The officers saluted and carried out his orders. Across the void, the Terran Dominion's fleet advanced, hundreds of warships spreading like an unrelenting tide. Unlike the sleek and elegant designs of the Council's ships, the Terran vessels were built for war, dark, angular, heavily armored, and bristling with weaponry. They were not here to negotiate. They were here to reclaim what was taken from them. On the Council floor, Aurelius forced himself to remain calm. He activated his private channel, linking to the commanders of the Council's defense fleet. "Deploy all available forces," he ordered. "We must make a stand." "Sir," came the hesitant voice of Admiral Kyle, the supreme commander of the Council's military. "We are outnumbered and outgunned. Their technology is—" "I do not care," Aurelius snapped. "We are the Galactic Council. We have ruled this galaxy for millennia. We will not bow to an upstart empire of savages." A long pause. Then Kyle spoke again, his voice heavy with doubt. "Yes, Chancellor. Engaging the enemy?" The battle for the galaxy had begun. The void ignited with war. The Galactic Council's fleet surged forward, a desperate attempt to halt the advancing Terran Dominion. Thousands of sleek, silver ships moved in perfect formation, their energy cannons glowing with deadly intent. From the surface of Celestria Prime, civilians watched in horror as the sky above them became a battlefield. And then, the Terran fleet opened fire. Massive railguns thundered, sending projectiles the size of buildings tearing through the Council's ranks. Plasma torpedoes streaked through space, striking enemy cruisers and reducing them to molten wreckage. Unlike the Council's reliance on elegant energy weapons, the Terran Dominion had mastered the brutality of kinetic warfare. High-velocity rounds that ignored energy shields, tearing through hulls like paper. Admiral Kyle barely had time to react before his flagship, the Celestial Honor, was struck by a barrage of hypervelocity slugs. The bridge shuddered violently as entire decks were obliterated in an instant. Alarms blared, and his officers screamed in panic. "We're losing containment on the starboard side." "Multiple hull breaches. Damage is catastrophic." Kyle gritted his teeth. "Return fire. All batteries. Target the enemy battleships." The Celestial Honor launched a retaliatory strike, but it was a pitiful response. The Dominion's ships were larger, more heavily armored, and built with a level of efficiency the Council had never encountered. For every Terran warship that fell, 10 Council ships were obliterated in return. This wasn't a battle. It was a massacre. From the bridge of the Indomitable, Admiral Voss observed the battle unfold with cold precision. He had expected resistance. He had even expected desperation. But this was pathetic. The Galactic Council had grown complacent, soft. They had spent centuries ruling from their gilded thrones, growing fat and weak while humanity had been struggling, evolving, mastering the art of survival. Now the difference in power was undeniable. "Target their flagship," Voss ordered. A moment later, the massive railguns of the Indomitable locked onto the Celestial Honor. "Fire!" A blinding streak of light shot through space, and Kyle had only a second to react before his ship was torn in half. The explosion rocked the battlefield, sending debris and bodies spiraling into the void. The Council fleet broke. Their formations collapsed, and ships began retreating in every direction. Some fled toward Council space, while others simply surrendered, powering down their weapons in the hope that the Dominion would spare them. Voss let them run. It wasn't about annihilation, not yet. "Begin planetary occupation procedures," he commanded. The Dominion had returned, and now it was time to take what was rightfully theirs. On Celestria Prime, High Chancellor Aurelius watched in silent horror as the skies filled with descending Terran warships. The battle had lasted mere hours, yet his mighty fleet had been shattered. The realization clawed at his mind. There was no stopping them. The Banished had become rulers. The Forgotten had returned as conquerors. For the first time in his long life, Aurelis felt something he had never known before. Fear. The sky burned as Terran warships descended. Celestria Prime, the heart of the Galactic Council, had never known invasion. For thousands of years, it had stood as an untouchable jewel of power and civilization. Now, its grand spires and golden cities trembled beneath the weight of an unstoppable force. Dropships cut through the atmosphere like falling stars, their hulls black and unmarked, save for a single chilling insignia, the sigil of the Terran Dominion. On the ground, panic gripped the streets. Civilians ran, their voices rising in terror as massive troop carriers landed across the capital. Elite council guards took up defensive positions, their energy rifles aimed toward the heavens, waiting for the enemy to emerge. And then the Terrans stepped onto their soil. Clad in dark, reinforced armor, their soldiers moved with an efficiency that sent a shiver down the spines of the defenders. Their weapons, far more brutal than the clean, elegant technology of the Council, were designed for one thing: absolute destruction. The first shots were fired. The defenders never stood a chance. The Council's soldiers were trained for ceremonial warfare. Conflicts fought at a distance, battles dictated by politics and treaties. The Terrans, however, were warriors forged in exile, tempered by generations of hardship and battle. The clash was over in minutes. What little resistance remained either surrendered or was swiftly eliminated. Soon, the streets of the capital were filled with the echoes of marching boots, Terran banners unfurling over government buildings, over council headquarters, over everything the old regime once held sacred. In the Grand Council chamber, High Chancellor Aurelis sat frozen in his throne. Surrounding him were the remnants of the Galactic Council, their once proud faces now hollow with fear. Holograms flickered as planetary leaders from across council space demanded answers, their panicked voices overlapping. "What are we to do? They've already taken 3 core worlds. Our fleets are in shambles. We must negotiate. Offer them something, anything." Aurelis barely heard them. His mind was still trying to process the sheer speed of the fall. A deep, mechanical hiss filled the chamber as the grand doors slid open. Silence fell over the council. Admiral Darius Voss entered, flanked by 2 Terran shock troopers. Unlike the finely adorned robes of the council, he wore no ceremonial garb, only the cold, battle-worn armor of a man who had seen war and survived it. He did not bow. He did not speak immediately. He simply looked at them. The weight of that gaze made Aurelis feel smaller than he ever had in his life. When Voss finally spoke, his voice was calm, measured. "You exiled us to die." The words rang through the chamber like a hammer striking stone. "You cast us into the abyss and thought we would perish, that we would fade into nothing." Voss took a slow step forward, his presence suffocating. "But we did not die. We endured. We conquered. We built something greater than your feeble council ever could." Aurelis swallowed, struggling to maintain composure. "Admiral Voss, surely there is room for—" "Silence!" The single word cut through the air like a blade. Aurelis flinched. "You do not speak," Voss said. "You listen." The counselors around Aurelis remained deathly still. No one dared to challenge the man who now stood before them. Voss slowly surveyed the room before delivering the final blow. "The Galactic Council is no more." Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the chamber, but none dared to raise their voices. "From this moment forward, the Terran Dominion rules this galaxy. Your authority is gone. Your titles mean nothing." Aurelis clenched his fists. "And if we refuse?" Voss smiled, a cold, knowing smile. "You won't." The chamber doors opened again, and more Dominion soldiers entered, their weapons held at the ready. The message was clear. Aurelis's heart pounded in his chest. His empire, his legacy, had crumbled in mere hours. He had been the most powerful man in the galaxy. Now, he was nothing more than a relic of the past. And humanity? Humanity was the future. The weight of those final words settled over the chamber like a funeral shroud. The Galactic Council was no more. Aurelis felt his breath quicken as the realization struck him. Everything they had built, the centuries of dominance, the carefully maintained illusion of power, it had all crumbled in the span of a single day. And now, they ruled. Admiral Voss took another step forward, his presence towering over the defeated counselors. His gaze was calm, but there was something far more terrifying beneath the surface, a restrained fury, a cold, controlled rage that had been forged over generations of suffering. "You believed yourselves gods," Voss continued, his voice steady, "sitting here in your ivory towers, dictating the fate of lesser species, deciding who was worthy of existence, and when you saw something you couldn't control." He let the words hang for a moment before finishing, with a quiet, lethal edge. "You cast it into the dark." Aurelis clenched his jaw. "It was never meant to be like this." Voss scoffed. "You made it like this." A heavy silence followed. The truth of that statement weighed on every counselor present. They had doomed humanity to extinction. Or so they thought. Aurelis glanced at the other members, searching for any sign of resistance, of defiance. He found none. Their spirits were already broken, defeated before the first shot had ever been fired. "You have two choices," Voss continued, shifting his stance. "Swear loyalty to the Terran Dominion, or be erased." There was no threat in his voice, no dramatic emphasis, just a statement of fact. A truth written in blood and steel. Aurelis felt a cold sweat break across his skin. His lips parted, but the words would not come. For the first time in his long rule, he was powerless. And then, one by one, the counselors began to kneel. Razek, the once proud leader of the Vorkal Dominion, lowered his scaled head. Drenveli of the Celadari folded her translucent hands in surrender. Others followed suit, their shoulders slumped, their gazes fixed downward. Aurelis wanted to scream, to fight. But what was left to fight for? His empire was gone. Slowly, unwillingly, the last High Chancellor of the Galactic Council fell to his knees. Admiral Voss exhaled, as if the entire moment had been an inevitability. "Good," he said. "You learn quickly." Behind him, Dominion officers stepped forward, datapads in hand. "Have them sign the surrender orders. Effective immediately, all planetary governments will operate under Terran rule. The Dominion Senate will oversee the transition process." Aurelis barely heard him. His mind was still reeling. The Galactic Council, the greatest power the universe had ever known, was no more. And the exiled species they had abandoned? They now ruled everything. The occupation began immediately. Across the galaxy, Terran fleets arrived on once untouchable Council worlds, their banners raised over capitals that had never known conquest. The old rulers were stripped of power, their armies dismantled. Those who resisted were swiftly dealt with. Some thought the Dominion would bring ruin, that humanity would seek vengeance, would burn the galaxy to the ground in retribution for centuries of betrayal. But Voss had no interest in destruction. No, he wanted order. Humanity had suffered in the void, had clawed its way from extinction to dominance. And now they would shape the galaxy in their image. The weak, bloated rule of the Council was over. A new era had begun. An era of Terran supremacy. The banners of the Terran dominion hung over every conquered world. Celestria Prime, once the heart of the Galactic Council, now served as the seat of humanity's rule. The grand spires, once symbols of the Council's unshakable authority, were draped in Terran insignias. The once opulent halls of government now echoed with the sound of Terran boots and the hum of war machines securing control. And at the center of it all stood Admiral Darius Voss, the architect of humanity's return. From the newly claimed throne room, formerly the High Chancellor's private chamber, Voss stood before a massive holographic display tracking the ongoing occupation. Worlds fell in line with minimal resistance. Some surrendered outright, their rulers bending the knee the moment the Dominion fleet darkened their skies. Others required force. A few, still clinging to the arrogance of the old regime, thought themselves immune. They would learn. A Dominion officer stepped forward, saluting sharply. "Admiral, resistance cells have been detected on several Outer Rim colonies. Former Council loyalists are attempting to reorganize." Voss nodded, unsurprised. "They won't last. Crush them before they gain traction." The officer hesitated. "And the former Council leadership?" Voss turned his gaze toward the far end of the chamber. There, under heavy guard, knelt Aurelis and the remaining members of the old Galactic Council. Stripped of their ornate robes, their authority gone, they were nothing now but relics of a shattered order. Aurelis raised his head, his once proud eyes now hollow. "What now, Admiral?" His voice was quieter than before, lacking the arrogance he once carried. "Will you execute us?" Voss regarded him for a long moment. The thought had crossed his mind. These beings had condemned humanity to the abyss, left them to die. And yet, "No," Voss finally said. "You'll serve." Murmurs rippled through the kneeling councilors. Aurelis frowned. "Serve?" Voss leaned forward. "You ruled for thousands of years, thinking yourselves gods. Now you will watch as we reshape the galaxy in our image. You will sit in the ruins of your empire and witness how true strength commands order." Aurelis's hands clenched into fists. "You think you can hold all of this together? You think the other races will simply bow?" He let out a hollow laugh. "You will see, Admiral. Ruling a galaxy is far more difficult than conquering one." Voss smirked. "Then it's a good thing we spent centuries learning how to survive the impossible." The Dominion's rule spread like wildfire. Humanity did not seek destruction, only control. The Council's bloated bureaucracy was dismantled, replaced by the cold efficiency of Terran governance. The Dominion Senate was established, filled with the brightest minds of humanity, as well as select alien officials who swore loyalty. To some, the transition was a blessing. Under Council rule, corruption had festered, favoring the privileged and the powerful. The Dominion, by contrast, rewarded loyalty and strength. Worlds that accepted Terran rule found themselves rapidly rebuilt, their infrastructures reinforced, their economies strengthened under the iron grip of Dominion law. But for those who resisted? The Dominion had no patience for rebellion. Entire fleets were annihilated before they could form resistance movements. Leaders who defied humanity's rule disappeared overnight, replaced by Dominion-appointed overseers. The message was clear. There would be no second chances. And yet, in the shadows, whispers of defiance remained. Not all species accepted the rule of their former exiles. Not all would kneel. Something was brewing in the dark corners of the galaxy. And even as humanity stood at the pinnacle of power, an unseen storm gathered on the horizon. The war for survival was over. The war to keep their empire had just begun. Across the stars, the Terran Dominion's grip tightened. Fleet after fleet, world after world, humanity extended its iron rule over the galaxy. What had once been the domain of the Galactic Council was now the dominion of a species once cast into the void to die. But as the Dominion's banners flew over conquered worlds, something else stirred in the darkness. Resistance. Deep within the Crazon Nebula, hidden beyond the reach of Dominion patrols, a gathering took place. The chamber was dimly lit, a circular hall carved from the ancient stone of a forgotten world. Around the central table sat the last remnants of the old order, leaders of species that had once ruled, now reduced to fugitives and rebels. Aurelis sat among them, no longer the High Chancellor of the Galactic Council, but a traitor to the new order. The fall of the Council had broken him, but only for a time. Now, in the shadows, he plotted the downfall of the very force that had shattered his empire. "We cannot fight them head-on," growled Razek, his scaled features contorted in frustration. "They are too strong. Their fleets are relentless, their technology built for war." A murmur of agreement rippled through the chamber. "They fight like a species with nothing to lose," added Dren Veli, her translucent form shimmering in the low light. "They are not bound by the old ways of war. We underestimate them at our peril." Aurelis steepled his fingers. "Then we do not fight them as we did before. We do not stand and let them crush us." He leaned forward, his voice a whisper of controlled fury. "We break them from within." Eyes turned toward him. "We will make their empire rot," he continued. "We will turn their strength into weakness, their efficiency into chaos." His voice darkened. "We will give them the very thing they gave us: exile, pain, despair." The others exchanged glances. A few nodded slowly. Razek's clawed fingers drummed against the table. "You speak of sabotage, assassination." "I speak of war," Aurelis corrected. "A war they will never see coming." Dren Veli's luminous eyes narrowed. "You want to become them?" Aurelis did not hesitate. "Yes. Because if humanity had taught the galaxy one thing, it was this: the strong survive. And Aurelis intended to survive, even if it meant becoming the very monster that had once stood in his place. Meanwhile, on Celestria Prime, Admiral Darius Voss stood atop the Grand Spire, looking out over the city that was now the beating heart of the Terran Dominion. He could feel it, the resistance, the quiet hum of defiance that still clung to the air. They were planning something. And yet Voss was not afraid, because he knew something the rebels did not. Humanity was built in the dark. They had survived exile, they had conquered the void, and no matter what came next, they would never fall again. The storm was coming. Admiral Voss could feel it in the air, in the coded transmissions intercepted from the far reaches of space, in the subtle shifts in behavior from those who had accepted Dominion rule too easily. The rebels thought themselves clever, hidden, but Voss knew war, true war, and he knew the signs of an enemy that was preparing to strike. Humanity had clawed its way from the abyss once. They had built an empire from the ashes of betrayal. Now they would keep it, or burn the galaxy to the ground trying. The first act of defiance came on Zelkar 7, a quiet, unremarkable world, once a crucial hub of council governance, now another cog in the ever-expanding machine of the Terran Dominion. It had surrendered without a fight, its leaders bowing before the inevitable. But surrender and loyalty were not the same thing. The explosion tore through the Dominion outpost in the dead of night. A chain reaction of plasma detonations obliterated key infrastructure, leveling entire command centers. Thousands of Terran personnel were incinerated before alarms even had a chance to sound. By the time Dominion forces scrambled to respond, the rebels were gone. All that remained was a simple message, burned into the ruins of the command spire. "You were banished once. You will be banished again." Voss read the report in silence. Around him, the Dominion War Council stood at attention, waiting for his response. General Cassian, a veteran of the Exile Wars, spoke first. "We've begun tracking resistance cells. They're moving in patterns designed to mimic natural trade routes, avoiding direct confrontation. They strike hard, then disappear before we can retaliate." A classic strategy, one humanity had once used against the Council during their years in the dark. Voss exhaled slowly, his fingers tightening around the edges of the datapad. He should have expected this. No empire rules unchallenged. But what the rebels did not understand was that humanity had been forged by suffering. They had not built their dominion on blind arrogance, nor on the assumption that power alone would keep them safe. They had built it with blood and fire. "Increase security across all occupied worlds," Voss commanded. "Every planetary governor answers directly to Dominion oversight. Any sign of rebellion is to be met with absolute force." He turned his gaze to Cassian. "And double the strength of our Black Guard." A ripple of unease passed through the room. Even among the Dominion elite, the Black Guard were whispered about with caution. They were more than just soldiers. They were enforcers, ghosts, specialists in rooting out defiance before it had a chance to fester. A shadow war was beginning, and in the end, only one side would be left standing. In the depths of the Krezen Nebula, Aurelis watched as the first phase of his plan unfolded. Zelkar 7 was just the beginning. Humanity had spent centuries rising from nothing, building an empire that should have been impossible. Now Aurelis would force them to defend it. He would push them into desperation, and desperation made even the strongest rulers make mistakes. "Strike here next," he ordered, pointing to a Dominion supply line. "Let them feel the weight of war on every front, make them doubt their control." Drenveli hesitated. "We're risking open conflict. If we push too hard, we break them." Aurelis' voice was stone. "That is the only way." His hands clenched into fists. He had watched his empire fall. He had seen humanity rise from the abyss. Now he would drag them back down, no matter the cost. The Dominion struck back with precision. Admiral Voss wasted no time in responding to the rebellion. If the former Council remnants thought they could wage a war of sabotage and whispers, they would soon learn what it meant to provoke the empire that had survived the void. Zelkar 7, once a thriving world, was placed under total lockdown. Every citizen was questioned. Every suspected rebel sympathizer was rounded up. The Black Guard moved like shadows through the streets, disappearing entire families overnight. The message was clear. Defy humanity, and you will suffer. And yet, despite the show of force, the resistance did not break. It spread. The next attack came on Trelos 9, a critical Dominion shipyard. It began with a simple system failure, a small power fluctuation in one of the orbital platforms. Nothing alarming, until the automated repair systems turned against their operators. Turrets, designed to protect Dominion warships under construction, suddenly activated, targeting their own fleet. Defense grids fired on human vessels, turning the station into a battlefield of confusion and friendly fire. By the time the security breach was isolated, 3 capital ships lay in ruins, and the rebels had vanished once again. Voss read the report in silence. The anger in the War Council chamber was palpable. "Sabotage at this level requires inside knowledge," General Cassian growled. "They have infiltrators, informants. We need to purge every non-human from critical positions." The suggestion caused a stir. The Dominion had ruled with strength, but also with order. They had allowed alien administrators to serve under Terran oversight, integrating them into the Empire, rather than ruling purely by force. But now, trust had become a liability. Voss considered the implications carefully. "Not yet," he said finally. "Panic is what they want. If we start tearing apart our own infrastructure, we do their work for them. He turned his gaze to the intelligence officers. Find the source of the leak. We cut off the head of this movement, and the body will die. One of the officers hesitated. Sir, we believe we may already know who is leading them. A name appeared on the holo display. Aurelis. Voss' expression darkened. It was fitting, in a way. The man who had once ruled the galaxy now sought to burn it rather than accept humanity's dominion. But the former High Chancellor had made a mistake. He had chosen war against the very species that had mastered survival. Meanwhile, in the heart of the Crazon Nebula, Aurelis stood before his growing army. Today we bleed them, he declared, his voice echoing through the war chamber. Tomorrow we take back what was stolen from us. His followers, a coalition of alien species once loyal to the old Galactic Council, roared in agreement. For too long, they had let humanity dictate their future. Now it was their turn to shape the fate of the galaxy. The war was only beginning, and neither side would stop until the other was nothing but dust. The Dominion was bleeding, not enough to cripple it, not yet. But the Resistance had done something far worse than destroying ships or bombing outposts. They had planted doubt. For the first time in decades, murmurs of defiance rippled through the conquered worlds. Minor uprisings flared in the outer colonies, silent protests, subtle acts of disobedience. Nothing that could be labeled treason outright, but enough to make Voss furious. The Dominion had been built on strength, on humanity's refusal to be ruled. And yet, here they were, struggling against the very tactics that had once made them rise. Voss would not let history repeat itself. Celestria Prime, Dominion War Council chambers. The room was tense, lined with the Dominion's highest-ranking officials, warlords, and strategists. The losses on Trelos 9 and Zelkar 7 had stung, and every eye was fixed on Admiral Voss, waiting for his next move. General Cassian was the first to speak. We cannot afford to keep playing defense. Aurelis is turning our own strategy against us. If we allow him to dictate the pace of this war, we might as well hand him the galaxy. A murmur of agreement spread through the room. Voss nodded. Agreed. We take the fight to them. He pulled up a holographic star map. We know where they are hiding. The Crazon Nebula. It won't be easy to reach them. The nebula is dense, full of electromagnetic interference. But if we strike hard, we can wipe them out in one blow. Cassian's lips curled into a ruthless grin. A full-scale invasion? No, Voss said. Not yet. We send in the Black Guard first. The murmurs turned to uneasy silence. Even among humanity's elite, the Black Guard were feared. They were not soldiers. They were executioners, assassins, infiltrators, ghosts. If Aurelis wants to fight from the shadows, Voss continued, then we'll show him what true darkness looks like. Deep within the Crazon Nebula, Aurelis stood before his growing rebellion. The Resistance was no longer just a scattered collection of fugitives. It was an army, battle-hardened warriors from species who had once ruled the galaxy, engineers and scientists who had fled the Dominion's grasp. They had weapons, ships, resources, and soon they would have vengeance. Drenveli approached him, her translucent skin shimmering. Our next target? She asked. Aurelis glanced at the holomap. We keep striking where they least expect it. We spread them thin, make them fight on every front. Dren hesitated. We're pushing them into a corner. You know what happens when humans are cornered. Aurelis smiled coldly. Yes, he said. They fight like demons. His gaze darkened. But this time, so will we. And in the shadows, the Black Guard prepared. Their orders were simple. Find Aurelis, kill him, and remind the galaxy why humanity was never meant to be ruled. The galaxy held its breath as the silent war escalated. Admiral Voss stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching as the Black Guard's stealth frigates slipped into the void, their matte black hulls vanishing against the backdrop of space. They were headed for the Krazen Nebula, humanity's most lethal weapon unleashed on a mission of surgical precision. No grand fleets, no overwhelming displays of force, just shadows moving through the dark, carrying death in their wake. Voss knew the stakes. The Dominion's dominance rested on its ability to project invincibility. Every rebel strike chipped away at that image, every act of defiance a crack in the foundation. Aurelius had turned humanity's own playbook against them. Guerrilla tactics, sabotage, fear. But Voss had no intention of letting the former High Chancellor dictate the terms of this fight. The Black Guard would end it. Deep within the nebula, Aurelius paced the command chamber of his hidden stronghold. The air was thick with tension, the hum of machinery, and the distant clatter of weapons being prepared. His forces had grown stronger, more organized. Reports streamed in from across Dominion space, successful strikes on supply lines, propaganda spreading unrest, worlds beginning to question the iron grip of humanity. "We're winning," Razek said, his reptilian eyes gleaming with satisfaction as he reviewed the latest reports. Their response has been predictable. Brutal, but predictable. They're tightening control, alienating their own allies. Aurelius didn't share the optimism. "They're not beaten yet. Voss is no fool. He'll adapt." Drenveli stepped forward, her voice soft but firm. "We've intercepted chatter. They're sending something into the nebula, not a fleet, something smaller, covert." Aurelius's eyes narrowed. The Black Guard. A ripple of unease passed through the room. Even among the rebels, the reputation of the Dominion's shadowy enforcers was enough to stir fear. "They'll come for me," Aurelius said, more to himself than the others. "Voss knows I'm the head of this rebellion. Cut me down and the body falters." Razek growled. "Then we fortify. We trap them here." "No," Aurelius countered. "If they're coming, we use it. We turn their strength into a weakness." He turned to the holomap, pointing to a dense cluster of asteroid fields within the nebula. "We lure them in, make them think they've caught us off guard, then we spring the trap." Drenveli frowned. "And if they don't take the bait?" Aurelius's lips curled into a grim smile. "They will. Humanity doesn't back down from a fight." The Black Guard arrived like phantoms. Their ships slipped through the nebula's interference, sensors barely registering their presence. They moved in silence, their operatives trained for one purpose: elimination. At their helm was Commander Lisa Coyne, a woman whose name was spoken only in whispers. She had led the Guard through the bloodiest campaigns of the Exile Wars, her loyalty to humanity absolute, her methods merciless. "Target confirmed," her second-in-command reported, voice low over the comms. "Aurelius's stronghold, dead ahead. Minimal defenses detected." Kane's eyes scanned the data. "Too minimal," she muttered. "He's baiting us." "Then what's the play?" her officer asked. "We spring the trap," Kane said, her tone cold, "and turn it back on them." The assault began. The Black Guard descended on the stronghold with ruthless efficiency, cutting through outer defenses like a blade through silk. Explosions lit the asteroid field as rebel ships scrambled to respond, caught off guard by the speed of the attack. Aurelius watched from the command chamber as the chaos unfolded. "They're here," he said, voice steady. "Signal the ambush." Hidden among the asteroids, rebel ships powered up, vessels stolen from Dominion shipyards, refitted with salvaged Council tech. They surged forward, encircling the Black Guard's position, cutting off their escape. For a moment, it seemed Aurelius had outmaneuvered them, but Kine had anticipated this. "Detonators," she ordered. A series of pre-placed explosives erupted across the asteroid field, shattering the rebel trap into fragments. The blasts caught the ambush fleet off guard, sending ships spinning into one another, their formation collapsing in the chaos. The Black Guard pressed the advantage, their frigates weaving through the debris, targeting vital systems with surgical strikes. Rebel casualties mounted rapidly. Aurelius slammed a fist against the console as his plan unraveled. "They knew!" he hissed. "How did they know?" Drenveli's voice trembled. "We underestimated them again." Razek roared in frustration. "We need to pull back, regroup." "No," Aurelius snapped. "We fight. If we run now, we lose everything." The battle raged on, a brutal dance of destruction in the heart of the nebula. The Black Guard were outnumbered, but their precision and ruthlessness kept them in control. Back on the Indomitable, Voss received the first reports. "The Guard has engaged the enemy," an officer relayed. "Heavy resistance, but they're holding." Voss nodded. "Good. Let Aurelius think he has a chance. Then crush him." The galaxy watched, waiting to see who would emerge from the shadows victorious. The Crazon Nebula burned with the fury of a dying star. The battle between the Black Guard and Aurelius's rebellion reached its brutal climax. Asteroids shattered under relentless barrages, rebel ships crumpled beneath the surgical precision of Dominion strikes, and the air within the stronghold grew thick with smoke and desperation. Aurelius stood at the heart of his crumbling command center, his once unshakable resolve fraying as the Black Guard closed in. Screens flickered with static, showing the devastation outside, his fleet reduced to wreckage, his soldiers falling one by one. Razek fought on at the front lines, roaring defiance until a plasma blast silenced him forever. Drenveli worked frantically to reroute power, her translucent hands trembling as she tried to hold their defenses together. "We can't win this," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the chaos. Aurelius didn't respond. His eyes were fixed on the holomap, watching as the last of his forces were systematically dismantled. He had gambled everything on this trap, believing he could outsmart humanity's shadows. But the Black Guard were not just soldiers. They were a force of nature, relentless and unstoppable. A deep rumble shook the chamber as the outer walls breached. The sound of boots echoed closer, accompanied by the sharp crack of Dominion weapons cutting through what remained of his guards. Commander Lysa Kine stepped into the room, her armor scorched but unbowed, her pistol leveled at Aurelius's chest. Behind her, Black Guard operatives fanned out, securing the chamber with cold efficiency. "You've lost," Kane said, her voice devoid of triumph or malice. Just fact. Aurelius straightened, meeting her gaze. "You think this ends with me? The galaxy will never stop fighting you." Khan tilted her head slightly. "Maybe, but you won't be there to see it." Before Aurelius could reply, a single shot rang out. The former High Chancellor crumpled to the ground, his lifeless eyes staring at the ceiling as the last spark of the old Galactic Council faded into history. Drenveli dropped to her knees, hands raised in surrender. The fight was over. The Black Guard withdrew as silently as they had come, leaving the nebula a graveyard of shattered dreams. Aboard the Indomitable, Admiral Voss received the confirmation. "Aurelius is dead," Commander Kane reported over the comms. "The rebellion's leadership is broken. Their forces are scattered." Voss allowed himself a rare moment of satisfaction. "Good work. Return to base. We'll handle the rest." The rebellion wasn't gone. Not entirely. Pockets of resistance would linger, embers of defiance smoldering in the dark corners of the galaxy. But without Aurelius, they lacked the vision, the unity, to pose a real threat. The Dominion would hunt them down, one by one, until the last whisper of rebellion was extinguished. Days later, Voss addressed the galaxy from Celestria Prime. His broadcast reached every world under Terran rule, a message etched in steel. The rebellion is ended. Those who sought to defy us lie broken. Let this be a lesson to all who would challenge the Dominion. Humanity does not falter. We do not forgive, and we do not fall. The galaxy listened in silence. Some bowed their heads in submission. Others clenched their fists in quiet rage, but all understood the truth. The Terran Dominion was unshakable. From the void, humanity had risen. Against betrayal, they had endured. And now, atop the ruins of the old order, they reigned supreme. The war was over, the Empire stood, and the stars themselves seemed to bend to humanity's will.